I said skeletal warriors, talking frogs, dancing shadows, and Pinocchio, would you be able to name the one thing they all have in common? They're puppets. Dating as far back as 2000 BC, in Egypt at least, puppets of some kind have been a part of our lives. Early on, puppets were used to showcase classics like the Iliad or the Odyssey. Plato and Archimedes referenced puppets in their work, and as technology grew, so did the role of puppets. From Howdy Doody and Lamb Chop to Kermit the Frog and Punch and Judy, puppets and puppetry quickly became a staple of the early television age. Around the same time, you see the excellence of stop motion in Ray Harryhausen's Jason and the Argonauts, or in his work in The Golden Voyage of Sinbad, though stop motion can first be seen in The Humpty Dumpty Circus, a film that dates back to 1898. More current-day stop-motion films that might catch your ear are The Nightmare Before Christmas, Coraline, or James and the Giant Peach. Though stop-motion and even broad puppetry techniques can be seen in landmark film franchises such as Star Wars, Star Trek, Terminator, and a host of amazing horror films. Puppetry, and being a puppeteer, is not easy. It takes years to master, a lot of drive, and a passion for an art form that, on the surface, a number of folks would relegate to being for kids. If you've seen the work of my guest today, you'll know that she plays with themes of loss, love, rebirth, control, and imagery that stems from everyone's unforgettable nightmares, for better or worse. Today on The Trenches is Sarah Legault. Sarah, how are you?
Good. How are you doing today?
Oh, you know, peachy keen as always. For people that might not know, why don't you tell them where you are from and how you would describe that place?
Okay. I'm from London, Ontario in Canada. We call it the other London.
The other London.
London is an interesting small city in southern Ontario. It's close to Toronto, if nobody's ever heard of it before. Find London to be a really unique place to live. I'm not originally from here, but I found that there was quite an eclectic scene for art and music, which is actually what brought me here probably about 12 years ago. So London has this great landscape around it of noise music. So you'll have bands like the Nihil Spasm Band, who's been playing for 52 years, where you have these guys they're probably in their 60s, 70s, and they decided to never play instruments. They learned to never actually learn how to classically play, but they wanted to scare out their audience by the end of their shows. This is the dynamic of things that happen in London. People are making movies on their own, lots of short filmmakers, lots of writers are coming from here. People just seem to collaborate a lot in London, which is something that really drew me to this place. It's a little different than Toronto. Toronto, there's always something happening all the time. London, you always have to build something. So I kind of like the scenes where I can participate, where I can build something. So that, to me, is what London, Ontario is. Very
interesting, given what you do. And why don't you tell us what you do? I don't want to put a misnomer on what I think that you might do. But for everyone that's listening, how would you describe what you do kind of day to day in your form of art?
I do a mix of everything. So I'm an illustrator. I got into stop motion animation over the last few years, which is what I'm mainly focusing on now these days. I also do painting, photography, filmmaking. I've done producing, directing, doll making. We had an art doll gallery in London for about 3 years, which was all handmade dolls, which is actually what led me to start doing stop motion animation. Trying to remember what else. A little bit of everything. I like to dabble in everything.
I think it's a pretty impressive list so far. How did you get involved in this kind of field to begin with? Like, why the arts? Why illustration and all that stuff? Like, where does it all begin for you?
I don't know. I always remember drawing when I was younger. Earliest memories I have before kindergarten, I remember sitting and drawing with my aunt. And for some reason, this memory always stuck with me, where we were just scribbling and making lots of scribbles. And she said, try and find images within the scribbles. And for some reason, I thought that was really fascinating. So I always got stuck with the idea of just scribbling and seeing where everything went. And then in school, I, had bad habits of drawing in school and lots of report cards saying Sarah wasn't paying attention in class because she was too busy drawing on her friends.
It sounds like it's a good habit at this point.
Yeah, it's literally something that's never really gotten away from me. It just kind of got worse the older I got. And then I got interested in other mediums. And then when I moved to London, we had this, well, we called these events called outdoor painting parties, where we would invite everybody who was interested in writing, modeling, music, anything, art, music, anything creative related. We would have them over to the house. It was like once a week throughout the summer. And we would have probably about 20 people on the front lawn. And we would try and just work on our own projects, but kind of see if people were able to collaborate together. And then we had people who were professionals, people who were just interested in what was happening, and people who were wanting to learn. And then people were able to kind of learn from each other. So we found that to be really interesting. So that became a thing where I just like to randomly go around and learn things from other artists. So which is why I like collaborating with other people a lot. I can learn from them, they can learn from me, or we can experiment and come up with new things that we've never done before.
So you mentioned that you're not from London originally. Where did you come from? Was it Toronto?
No, I'm originally from a small town called Kincardine. It's on the shores of Lake Huron.
I got family in Kincardine. You're a Huron County girl. I like you even more now.
We're going to be almost related then.
Probably are in some weird way, which is why we probably get along so well as we do. So you're doing these outdoor painting parties, and you're probably getting exposed to a lot of people that have a lot of different visions or a lot of different approaches to material. Does any of that stick with you? Are you starting to be like exposed to new styles and techniques? Because you also said that you're getting a nice blend of pros and amateurs and hobbyists there. Like what is that artistic vibe that's coming out of these things?
Well, we ended up doing a music video for a band called Johnny Hollow with everyone who was coming to these painting parties. I'm trying to remember how big the crew was. We grabbed fashion designers from London, all the models and actors from London, and we had people helping making masks and props for the sets, and we packed everyone and went to Guelph and filmed this music video called Hollow World. We did it in one day. So that's the kind of stuff that we would do with each other. And that was my first time producing a music video before. It was a lot of fun. But it was just kind of like a fun experiment for everyone.
So I hate to keep belaboring this, but I have a reason for asking. At what point did you move from Kincardine to London? Like, how long have you been there? Because I'm from London as well, for everybody that's listening that may not have known. So how long have you been there?
I've been in London for about 12 years.
You see, this is the super interesting thing, okay? And this is the curse of being who I am. This is my bad luck. Okay. When I left London, everything good started to happen in London. You have cemented this in my brain, in the fates that make up my life. If I was to have a cup of tea and you were to look down at the leftovers, that would be the fate. When Rob leaves, things happen good to the places that he used to live. When I left London, they built the John Labatt Center, which is, I think, Budweiser Gardens now. They had a huge infrastructure of different artists that were coming in. And of course, you moved to town as I leave. And you're describing a community in London that is completely foreign to the London that I knew.
Well, I find that a lot of it was kind of like an underground scene. You had to know someone in order to get into some of these things. Like even when I'm talking about the noise music scenes here, like I have really eclectic tastes. So London is really filled with eclectic music, more than any other place I've ever been to. So I don't know. London has this charm that I've never seen in any other place, and the cost of living is really low. So as an artist, it's beneficial to be sticking around in this area. But I don't know. I kind of feel that maybe you need to know people in order to get invited to some of these events. Like one of the events that happened throughout the summer is Eric Stack. He does this experimental improv jazz nights. And the crowds are filled with all the old art and noise people from 60s and 70s, like all of the original people. So it would have been like the people who hung out with like Greg Curnow and stuff like that, who was a huge artist in London who passed away during a cycling accident. I don't remember what year. That would have been before I moved to London. But it's just, and the older crowds that were involved in these scenes back then, they're still doing it now. And they really enjoy involving the newer generations that are being creative and trying to start events and stuff like that. So there's a few other events that I notice are starting to pick up in London. I just went to last week at the Four City Gallery. Kalen Dye, he puts on a lot of weird film and music nights. So it was, they were screening 16 millimeter reels from artists from the States. And then they were doing these weird improv nights with different musicians that were just gradually coming up throughout the night. And I don't know, I guess it wasn't really advertised a whole lot, but there was quite a few people there.
So basically what you're saying is I was never cool enough to get these invites.
No, you just left too soon.
Okay, so it is the fact that I left, and I am plenty cool, according to you.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, let's jump to, I think what you mentioned earlier is might have been the kind of pivotal moment where you started to look at stop motion, and you said that you started to get involved with the Doll Museum, and I know you and I have talked offline a little bit here and there leading up to this, and for other things, of course. This is the Dollarium, right?
Yeah, it was called Delirium Art Doll Emporium. I lived downtown in London, and I was finished doing an art show, and the gallery was really close to my house, and I had this big display of handmade dolls that I had. And I was carrying them home, and I walked past this woman on the street, and she stopped me, and she said, "Where did you get those dolls?" I said, "I made them." And she said, "I make dolls." And I've never met another doll maker before in London or anything. And so she said, "You should come up to my shop sometime." She owned a tattoo shop in town. And she said, "You should come up there and we should just spend a day making art together." I didn't know who this woman was, but I was really fascinated, but I was also really shy. So I never went up to her studio to take her up on her offer. But I wanted to. And then somehow down the road, we got connected, and she asked me about the idea of opening up this doll gallery in town. And turns out that she traveled to the States a lot of these doll shows, and was friends with all of these other doll makers that I never knew about. I didn't realize that there was this whole scene of art doll makers. And it's, when I say art doll makers, I don't mean like they're making Barbies or like things for your children to play with. They're really alternative, one-of-a-kind pieces that are, some of them are quite out there. So we sat down, we had a meeting, we decided to give it a shot and open up this gallery. And it was operating for about 3 years. I think we showcased over 120 artists from over 12 countries around the world.
Wow.
And it was really fun. So every 5 weeks we would do a new show. We would bring in 21 artists at a time. You walked in, it looked like a terrifying set from, a Jim Henson movie or a Tim Burton movie or something like that, depending on the theme that we had for the shows at the time. But we would put on big productions. We'd have bands come play for the opening receptions, people blowing fire, street performers and stuff like that. And I remember the one year we did a Halloween costume contest where we told everyone if you dressed up like your favorite doll from any of the previous shows, you would be able to win prizes. And I couldn't believe there was probably about 40 people dressed up in costumes from from the dolls that were made at the gallery. And so it just seemed like this big community situation, and people were actually traveling from all over the place to come check out the gallery. Unfortunately, we had to close it down because there was a tragedy in Jackie Gallant's family. Jackie's the one who owned the gallery. I just helped manage it and helped curate the shows, but definitely a peak for fun things that I've done in my life, though.
Why did I leave London? That's all I keep coming back to. I'm sorry to make this all about me, but I feel like I'm really getting burned here. Oh, it sounds fantastic. And when you say doll to people, I think there's almost instantly the gut reaction to be, wow, that's kind of creepy. Whether it's because they've seen, a Child's Play movie with Chucky, or, their parents grew up with those, rooms that had nothing but porcelain or plastic dolls staring at them while they slept, or something like that. But what you're describing seems like really fun and creative. Gosh, again, the mind is swirling. So I guess the biggest thing is, what made you want to give these dolls life? Because you said that these dolls and that experience with these artists is what led you to animating them and creating stop motion pieces, yeah?
Oh yeah. Well, so I was always a big stop motion fan myself. So, old things like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer,
Sure.
that was around in the 80s that they used to play around Christmas every year. Huge Quay Brothers fan, Jan Svinkmeyer. You mentioned James and the Giant Peach. That was a huge one for me when I was growing up. I just love the idea of being able to create something and then make it look like it came to life. So for a while when I was doing these shows, I would always participate as an artist when we would have these shows at the Doll Gallery. And I started building them with wires in them so I can make them posable, because I was trying to build up the courage to be able to do a stop motion piece. And I was working with this artist in Berlin named Danielle DePicciotto on 2D animated projects. So we were working with, she was illustrating and I was animating her illustrations for music videos for bands called Crime the City Solution. So we did a bunch of projects for that. And then we worked with another band called American Mars. And then Danielle asked me to help her with her graphic novel that she was coming out with. And so I was she did this graphic novel that she illustrated of her and her husband. And I animated her illustrations for her book launch that she did. She would do live readings, and then her pages would be moving in the background. And she said that she did this annual show in Berlin where she just got groups of artists from around the world to participate. And she said, I want you to do your own project for this. And she invited me to come down, and there was 9 cinematographers that were taking part. I might have the number wrong, but so originally I think she thought I was going to do a 2D project, and I kind of thought this was going to be my first European show that I did. So I wanted to take the chance to do stop motion animation and really cross my fingers hoping that it was going to turn out. So I had about 8 months. So I went to a Quay Brothers exhibit in New York at the MoMA, and by far it was the most fascinating exhibit I've ever seen in my life. They had all of the sets just lined up on the main floor, and then I didn't know they did stage designs. I didn't realize they were graphic designers. They did a lot of music videos I was unaware of, and they were playing all of their films in different rooms. But the really fascinating part for me was seeing the sets that they had built downstairs. So I thought these stop motion sets were huge and took up rooms, and they weren't. They were actually quite small, and what they did was they were playing with forced perspective, which I didn't know anything about forced perspective at the time.
Why don't you tell people listening what that is?
So forced perspective is building a small room, but changing the angle of how the room is. So I guess the best way to explain it, I saw that exhibit, and then I came home, and we decided to build a stop motion set with forced perspective. So the film I did was called Dear Love. So it's about this man, the whole thing is structured in his bedroom. There's library shelves in there, and it's really long. But when you're looking at the film, doing a pan back shot, it looks like the room is just a normal shaped room. Now, if you actually look at that stop motion set and you take it all apart, you take the side of the set and look at it, the whole thing has a gradual slope to it. So the library shelf will actually be on a 45-degree angle instead of being horizontal. But when you look at it from far away, it gives you the idea that it's really long and perfectly straight.
So you're creating illusions with the way that you're constructing things to again, kind of fool the audience to save space, essentially.
Well, not just fool the audience, but then you can actually, it just looks like you have more, it looks like you have a bigger structure than you actually have.
Right.
So you're able to build these really small sets, but then visually watching it on film, it looks like it's a lot bigger. Yeah.
So you saw that from the Quay Brothers stuff, and that kind of blew you away that, wait a second, I don't need an entire warehouse space to do these sets. I have a chance at doing this stuff.
So my first movie I filmed it in my bedroom.
Nice.
I think my neighbors are used to me being a little bit quirky by now. Half the set was actually hanging out of my bedroom window because I did something that was probably something I would never suggest anybody do when they're doing stop motion. I was filming that film with natural lighting, which is really difficult because I kept doing these scenes where I really liked how the shadows would get drawn out in the stop motion effect. And so it just looked like the day was just quickly going by as the character was just being miserable. Just add more drama to everything. And I felt that I wasn't sure how to do that with a fixed lighting. Because I tried fixed lighting with the set originally, and it just didn't seem to give it the same effect. So I did a lot of time lapsing and whatnot. I don't know. The whole thing was a big experiment. Just like the last one I did was a big experiment as well. Only I didn't use natural lighting for the last one.
Sure.
That one was actually construction lights and flashlights I was using, and batteried lights, which was also interesting and maybe not the best idea, but it worked for the last film I did. So,
well, we'll definitely talk about Dear Love and Firefly in a minute. I gotta keep picking your brain on this art form, and I may have hidden secret motivations for doing that you're aware of that I can't quite disclose to everybody that's listening. But you mentioned that you saw the dolls and you wanted to bring them to life.
Yeah.
So why does puppetry work? Why, or what activates kind of that magic that deceives our brain? Like, even compared to like CG, right? Like, you look at a computer generated image and we know that it's fake.
Yeah.
And almost anything that those artists do, it's almost impossible for them to trick us in thinking that's real. But we look at a puppet and it's like, we know that it's not real, but we buy into it.
You know what? I'm wondering if it has some, like, I'm going back and thinking about the old Henson stuff. And I remember you and I were talking briefly about a Henson exhibit that we both went to in London.
Yeah.
I think it's the idea that people are actually operating these things. So there's just more life to it in general. When the computer is not really able to, CG, I'm on the fence with it. I'm not a huge fan of it because it's destroyed a lot of traditional puppetry. And my dream when I was younger was to work for the Jim Henson Company. So I think the idea is a computer's not able to give that much emotion of what a person can give to these puppets. It's like you watch things like Sesame Street and you're watching like Kermit the Frog and anything like that, or the Sweetums from the Muppets. It's like when you have a person more hands-on involved, I think it's just an easier way to trick everyone. It's not even so much tricking, but it also gives more of it makes you feel like a child when you're actually watching it, like those happy moments of, I'm not sure how this works, but this is really interesting at the same time.
It's crazy.
I don't know if I'm explaining this
No,
properly.
you are. You absolutely are. I think the fact that the thing exists and it's tangible goes a long way in combination with what you're saying, that there is a human there doing that. And I still don't know what the big magic answer is, if there is one, but I think you're right. There is a childlike innocence that hits us when we see these things because we want to believe they're real, even though we know they're not real. We're lying to ourselves like an alcoholic does. We just want to believe it. We want that fix because it is magical.
If someone comes out with a puppet and they start making it move and they're making jokes with it, opposed to like watching a digital animation online, I'm probably going to be smiling more like a child towards the puppet.
I agree. I don't know why, but I think it's super, super fascinating, which is, when I hear that there's a stop motion artist from London, Ontario, A, my hometown, B, an art form that I love, I'm instantly smiling before I see a single frame. And then, of course, I see your work and it's like, oh, wow, this is definitely special. I do want to get to your work, but I do have one kind of like broad question that I really haven't had too many people that I can throw at because I just don't know a lot of people in the space that you come from. What kind of things do you think, with puppetry, it comes the actual puppet, okay? And that can be like a person's hand, it can be a shadow on the wall, it could be a sock, it can be a marionette, it can be some of the dolls that you're using with the wireframe or the armature. Which resonate with you? Do they all hit you at different ways? What are the most effective kinds of puppets or puppetry, do you think, and why?
For me or in general?
Well, for you and in general.
Well, for me, okay, I really like meticulous work a lot. And for me, I think nothing gets more meticulous in animation than stop motion. Because you're dealing with, well, you have to be really careful. If you move something the wrong way, then the whole scene that you're filming needs to be reshot. You're dealing with 24 frames per second in order to make it look like it's moving in a proper manner. You have to be really delicate with how you're moving things. You have to have lighting properly. Sometimes you'll film things and you'll realize that your shadow showed up in one single shot out of 300 shots that you took, and you have to edit it out or reshoot everything. So it's this passion that gets involved and the dedication that gets involved that I think, for me personally, stop motion is my favorite. Like you look at these movies like Coraline, stuff like that. These movies take like years to make, building the sets, building the characters, building multiple emotions for the characters, animators coming in. Like I can't even imagine how many people are working on these productions. I'd like to see, but I've never been on set for anything like that. So,
but just to play devil's advocate, and I totally agree. I love the detail. Again, and I find it's an illusion that I'm willing to buy into when I watch stuff like, the Box Trolls or Coraline or like even James and the Giant Peach, or even just like certain scenes like in Star Wars where they're, it's the chess game that's coming to life. Yep. You see the fact that it's fake. You can see like the fingerprints sometimes on the thing. You can see the hair wisps, and yet you buy into it. But on the other side of the token, I would say you look at the stuff that like makes animatronics.
Oh yeah.
And the stuff that takes to make that work. So I don't know. Look at like
I love animatronics.
Yeah, look at Hoggle.
One of my dreams is to build like a robot.
Look at Hoggle though, right? Because there you have a little person in a suit. You have like 5 or 6 technicians. One is doing the eyebrows, one is doing the blinks, one is doing the mouth. Then you have the performance of Brian Henson in that case. So you've got this small team. Or look at the Skeksis from Dark Crystal, where you've got like 4 people that have to move around on a set that's built up high, and they have to work with all the technicians of a film crew. There's an equal level of detail that's got to be completely sorted out as well, right?
It's not even just working with a team of people. It's like you really have to understand how that other person moves and operates, right? So it's not to keep going back to the Quay brothers again, but if
please do. I'm fascinated by them because you sent me their link, and I've been watching the stuff, and I discovered that Chris Nolan has done a documentary on them, and he's doing a Blu-ray Criterion release of all their films, from what I can understand. So that's going to be great when that drops.
So it's the idea of like understanding how this is going to be related. I hope this is going to be related.
It doesn't matter. There's no format for this show. It's just whatever.
So they're identical twin brothers that both work in stop motion animation. That's why they call themselves the Quay brothers. But when you watch them work, I find it extremely fascinating, and it really makes me wish I had a twin to make my life a little bit easier. They operate like one person. They're not talking to each other. Their hands are just kind of moving as if it's one creature with 4 hands. That is really rare, to be able to find people that you can collaborate that are on the same mindset like that. I was watching a documentary recently about Alexander McQueen, and he had the same kind of kindredship with, I forget what her name was. Her name's Sarah. I know her name was Sarah. And when they would be working together making these elaborate outfits, she would be handing him needles. He wouldn't even be looking at her, and he would be grabbing these fabric pins from her without even making eye contact. Everything was just in sync. So when you're dealing with these puppet people, you have to be able to be matched up with the right person in order to be seamless how they are. Like the idea of movements of the character, eyes blinking the right time, mouth moving at the right time, just the emotion coming with it. If anything is out of line, it's not going to look real or have the same type of magic. But
is it your secret conspiracy that the Quay brothers are actually clones, and that's why they work so well?
It is kind of a secret fantasy of mine, yes.
So you mentioned like it's really hard to find literally that right-hand person to complete you. One of the people that connects us together is Jordan Morris, who I'm very grateful to have found as a collaborator. Him and I work together so well on so many different levels. And he is the voice of one of the characters in the film that I probably know best that you've done, called Dear Love, which we talked about a little bit earlier. And this is an award-winning animated short. I'll get you to tell us about the premise, and then let's talk some process about that.
Actually, the funny thing, though, about Jordan C. Morris is how I got him. There were some actors I was looking at in Toronto, and then someone suggested, why don't you put a post on Facebook and see if, and just do it, see if anyone's interested in doing auditions for it. So I thought, sure, let's try this. So my premise, because I was obsessed with the Storyteller series by Jim Henson, and John Hurt was the one who was the storyteller for a really long time. So my premise was, okay, I'm looking for someone that could, maybe sound like John Hurt, maybe mixed with the guys from the Twilight Zone, maybe a little Alfred Hitchcock. But John Hurt was the main premise of what I was trying to find. So Jordan, I never met in real life at that time. I kind of had. We organized these big shows called under the name the Shadowwood Collective, and Jordan was mysteriously there in like this really elaborate paper outfit. Like he had this giant paper mask and these fingers, and people thought he was part of our show because our show was it had like crazy fashion designers and human body suspenders and a lot of crazy alternative artists and stuff. And so people really dress up when they come to the event. But Jordan was just standing there. Nobody knew who this guy was. They thought he was part of the show, and I knew he wasn't because I organized the thing. And he was just staring at people with these really long fingers that probably went like a foot to a foot and a half hanging. And he just walked around the room and just stood there and stared at people. And nobody could figure out who this guy was. Eventually, I find out his name is Jordan C. Morris. And then Jordan C. Morris actually asked if he could apply for the role of Eros Baker. And we had him over, and he was amazing. Just in one shot. I think we filmed the whole thing in one afternoon, all of his lines. And he was great. And if you hear him talk as a regular Jordan C. Morris, he sounds nothing like the Eros Baker character. And that's the one thing people ask me first when they watch the film is who did the voice for that. I'm really happy that I ended up finding him. He's a great person to work with.
He's a guy that said, I started working with him in 2011 when we shot a movie called Unearthly. He was cast as an actor, stole the show as an actor on that, ended up being a production designer and a producer on that, and that's how we got together. And he said he wanted to switch from doing theater, because he had done a lot of acting and even behind the scenes, and really make a push to film. So he was done with acting and anything to do with that. And I had to twist his arm to do a voiceover for an animatic that I did that I think I shared with you called Grave Findings. And then when he told me that he's going to voice a character in this stop motion thing, the first thing I said is, you told me that you're done doing acting and voiceover work. He goes, well, when the right thing comes along, it comes along. So now I've got to hold that premise over him when I need him to do acting. I'm like, this is kind of the right thing, and it's coming along. You need to do this. Because he's so good. He is so good. Yeah,
I'm definitely happy that we ran into him. And he's just a nice guy in general, so it was really good to be able to make a friend out of that, too. So
yeah, I agree. So again, give us the short version of the synopsis for Dear Love. It is online for people to check it out. It is on YouTube if you search Dear Love, Sarah Legault, and we'll try to put it in the show notes so that people can kind of just click the link that are listening and following along with this. But tell us about the premise, and then let's dive into process. We've already heard a little bit about using natural light and forced perspective, but I got a million more questions.
So the premise of Dear Love, without trying to give too much away, is about this lonely character who is really distraught and kind of just trapped himself in his room. And for days and days and days, he's longing for the return of the love of his life. That's all I can really say without ruining too much.
It's basically my teenage years is what
yes,
you captured
I've
there.
Actually, I wasn't sure how people would take this film. Because it's pretty depressing. But the reactions that I saw of people and comments that I saw on the film really, really actually surprised me. A lot of people telling me that they had situations where they felt the same. They really felt connected to the character. But I guess, I don't know, by the time anyone's in adulthood, they have experienced heartache at one point or another. film actually kind of brings it to another level.
Well, I think you do it so well, and you've tapped into like a very universal human emotion without seeing humans on screen.
True. And someone else was asking that too, because the characters I use, his facial expression doesn't change ever, but they still said that you could feel expression in his face.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how we were able to pull that off, but
you don't say that, Sarah. You say we have secret techniques that allow us to pull that off. If you want to be part of that secret, they can hire you.
It's true. Edit that.
Well, I mean, you're already talking about audience reaction, so we'll jump back to process maybe in a minute. But like, you had this play at, was it the Toronto Independent Film Fest?
Yep, 2014. Surprisingly, ended up winning the best animated short for the Independent Film Festival in 2014.
It's pretty incredible. I think that's awesome. Do you? Well, what was it like seeing it on the big screen, and what was the reaction during the film as it was playing out? Was there things that you were noticing that you didn't expect, or?
Well, I tested that out at the Highland Cinema beforehand because I wanted to make sure my DVD was going to work. Uh-huh. And Victor, he's the projectionist there, was super awesome for helping me out with that. And so the first time I actually saw it on the big screen, it was just me and Victor in an empty movie theater, and my favorite movie theater in the city, which you've done screenings at that place as well.
Yeah, I love the Highland. They're great people.
Yeah, so just the idea of seeing it for the first time in the Highland with like just me and Victor, that was my magical moment. Though being able to sit in a room with everyone, I like the idea that it was in a city where nobody knew me, and I was able to sit in the audience anonymously. Now, there is one part in the movie where so I showcased this thing in Berlin the previous year, and then I did a screening in London for my family and friends and anyone local that was interested in seeing it. And then the Toronto one was the third time that we screened it. Now, something I noticed is everyone having the same reactions at the same time throughout the movie, every time that we screened it. And I really don't want to give too much away, though.
Okay, that's fair. Basically, if you're listening, go check it out. I find that really, really interesting that everyone reacts at the same spots. With the films that I've been able to show theatrically, there's always a few staples that they always hit that are very much planned, but there's always a handful of things that are like, wow, this audience reacted to this part. That's strange. And then sometimes it becomes like an ongoing thing as you keep playing it in other cities, and sometimes it's the anomaly. So that's super fascinating. I assumed that
everybody would have guessed what the ending was. So I guess what surprised me is that I have not met a single person yet that has been able to guess what the ending of that film was going to be.
I don't think the ending matters, because I think it's just such an awesome experience to watch it, to see that art form, to hear Jordan's voice play out.
Yeah.
That you're never thinking of the ending because you just want to be swept away into this world that we know and it's familiar, but it's so estranged to us.
Yeah.
You know, so the ending doesn't matter, and when the ending comes, it is jarring. It's a little bit of a surprise, but in a good way. You know.
Yeah.
Like the ending almost doesn't matter. It could have, without taking, knocking what the ending is down, the ending could have been anything. Everything works to that point that the ending could have been so many different things and it still would have been satisfying, but you give us a nice jarring kind of finish that still connects with what we've gone through and almost maybe plays on some of what our hopes and desires are for that moment on a certain level.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's super cool. You got to check out Dear Love. Again, it won Best Animated Short at the Toronto Independent Festival. You mentioned earlier with your outdoor painting parties, a group named Johnny Hollow, which, thanks to the film that you just shared with me not that long ago, a song that they did called Firefly, I've been kind of addicted to them. I've never heard of them because I'm not cool and I don't live in Canada anymore, because everything cool happens once I leave.
Hey, they might have been around. Actually, maybe they showed up just when you left.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I looked on, I think it was iTunes. I think their first album was like 2003. So that would have been...
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, that would have been basically when I left London and went to Toronto for a couple of years, and then I left. So definitely not cool. I was not cool enough to know them And but I love them. They're like really haunting. That's the best way that I can describe them. On iTunes, they're described as like electronic music or something. And I would just say that it's like haunting sounds with very talented people.
So one of the members from Johnny Hollow, I should probably mention this because I probably work and collaborate with him more than anyone to date. His name's Vincent Marconi, and he's very, very talented. He owns his own company called My Pet Skeleton. And so he's one of the members of Johnny Hollow, but he was also the producer of Firefly. And he was also the director of This Hollow World that we did together. And he's also the co-curator for the Shadowwood Collective with me. And then we also worked on one of his animation projects. I think it was 2011 it came out. I think we started it in 2009, finished in 2011, called The Lady Paranorma, where he actually turned me into the Lady Paranorma. So it was an animated process where they had two cameras filming my facial expressions, and we had these tracking balls on my face, and I had to act out everything that this character was going to do. And then they computer generated me, changed my features around, and then built the story around it. The coolest part is I got to work with one of my favorite people that I admired growing up from a band called Bauhaus, and his name is Peter Murphy. So we ended up getting Peter Murphy to narrate the whole story, which was one of my favorite projects to date. But yes, Johnny Hollow. Vince has worked with me through a lot of things, and he is the writer and producer for Firefly.
It's not only a great song, but it's an excellent. I don't even want to say music video because I don't think that does it justice. To be honest, it
started off with the idea of doing a music video because I was actually going to do a trilogy of depressing love stories. Dear Love. So I built this set. My neighbor Art Pratton, he's the violin player from the Nihilist Spasm Band. He helps me with the construction of these sets. And so we built the set. I was kind of testing around a character, and I did like a short 40-second clip, put it on the internet, and then Vincent saw it, and he said, "Can we change this and, make a music video for Johnny Hollow?" And I said, well, that's an interesting idea. So we added the drawers to the sets. We chose a song from their album to kind of format the storyline to, storyboarded everything out, built another set on top of it. And that's how Firefly ended up coming about. I'm totally going off track of where I was going with this.
No, well, I mean, one of the questions I had is where did the concept come from? So it was really born out of something else that you guys kind of reconfigured to fit the song.
Yeah. So then we had Johnny Hollow's very known for their websites that they had. They would have interactive websites where you had to solve riddles in order to get songs, which was really fascinating. So that was My Pet Skeleton, what Vince was really known for. That ended up doing that part. So they were known for like moths and butterflies and insects and ladybugs. So I found a few of these dead insects and decided to start moving them around in the set to see if it would work, which I thought worked really well with the appeal of Johnny Hollow. But I thought it gave more life having puppets and then these dead insects that looked like they were living as well. And the whole thing was an interesting idea. We're both happy with how it turned out, and we want to work on other projects eventually. But we also just finished this one, so
sure. I mean, if I was asked to describe it to anybody in the least amount of words, I would probably say it's gorgeously gruesome.
Yeah,
like
that works.
It is so cool, and I can see the tie-ins and the aesthetic that come from Dear Love. So now that you're saying, it's in the seeds of a trilogy that kind of fit that motif, but it still stands on its own, and it's so good. I don't even want to spoil like my favorite part, which plays into some of the lighting that you were talking about and what ends up happening. I just think it's awesome. And I'm just going to urge people to check it out. Again, we'll put the link in the show notes at the bottom of the description and stuff so people can check it out. How long did it take to pull off?
We were slowly working on it over a year, but we were also working on other projects at the same time.
Sure.
So it realistically, it would not have taken a year. I think when we started working on it pretty heavily, it was probably done within 3 or 4 months. So And Art Pratton helped me with the construction of that one, and then my uncle Elmer Kuchar actually helped with the lighting. So all of the lighting in her pockets and some of the lighting in the forest, because there was some CG for the background lights that we wanted to add more lights afterwards.
Sure.
So the CG shots were the backing lights, and then when she's standing in the room, it shows a shot of the forest, and then these lights come in. That was also CG. But all the lights that were put in the heads and her dress and everywhere else, and when she's grabbing them from these trees, those are all lighting rigs that my uncle ended up building for us, which was quite nice. And the tragic part of that is he actually passed away before we had a chance to finish it.
Aww.
So he never saw the final outcome, but I showed him parts of it before he passed away, and he was quite happy about it. So.
Well, I mean, the cool thing is, that kind of he gets to be a part of that forever, because film is forever, and nobody can ever change that. And
we actually dedicated the whole thing to him at the end, so it just seemed like the right thing to do.
Sure. It's such a good piece. I feel like I'm repeating myself with that, but it's as strong as Dear Love, if not stronger in other respects. And again, I don't want to say it's a music video because I think it stands on its own, yet I think the music can benefit from what you're doing and vice versa. So it's cool. You definitely got to check out Johnny Hollow if you haven't heard from them. Again, Spotify, iTunes, there's even a ton of stuff on YouTube. And check out the work that Sarah's done for Firefly. You're working on something that's really top secret now since January, and we already talked that you can't mention specifics.
Yeah.
So that's fine. I'm not going to probe while we're live recording here. But I do want to talk about, what is the career, trajectory for someone that is in stop motion? How do you get into this, and how do you find, your next projects, and what are you doing to kind of push forward, and what are some of your short-term and long-term goals? That's a
loaded question. I just want to keep doing whatever makes me happy. So I'm building another stop motion set at the moment. It's not for anyone. It's just that I feel like I got to keep doing this. There's grants that I can start applying for now because I have the other two films done, which is exciting for me to be able to get proper funding, because proper funding means more elaborate work. And I can bring more people in on the projects as well, which is nice. I don't know. I have a few meetings coming up with people that have saw the recent films and that seem excited about what it is that I've done. So I'm not sure where that leads yet, but there have been talk about other stop motion projects and then other meetings with producers that I have coming up. So I'm at that spot right now where it's, this interesting potential of seeing that I could keep doing this in the future, which makes me happy. I don't know. I guess the only thing I could really say to anyone that's passionate about something is to just keep doing what you love doing over and over and over, and eventually people tend to notice what it is that you're doing. So, and that's advice that someone gave me a long time ago, and they said just keep creating, and something will generally happen out of it. And I find every year it's been getting better, and more people have been noticing, and I've been able to collaborate with some of my favorite people on the planet. And even this top secret project that you were referring to, that person who asked me to potentially work on this project with them is one of the most inspiring people I've ever met. So that project is a fun project and completely up my alley with what it is. And just the idea of being able to work with someone who's been such a huge inspiration to me is probably more than the most part that matters in anything. And we're talking in code now, so.
At some point, your answers are going to be like Morse code, like beeps and dashes, and you can't say anything. And now it'll be like a Johnny Hollow interview where you've got to decipher the riddles to get the answers.
I wish I could talk more about it. I haven't asked him if I could talk publicly about it, but there's a lot of things where the project can happen or not happen, or maybe they don't like what I end up doing and they end up giving it to someone else eventually. So I don't know. It's this ongoing thing that's been going on for a while.
It's totally cool. I mean, I'm not pushing or anything like that. I'm just excited that you have something that has a lot of potential and that you enjoy doing, which makes kind of my next question maybe unfair. Do you ever see yourself taking on something that's like very corporate and sunshine and lollipops and rainbows? Because the stuff that you do is pretty much like a dark, grim aesthetic. So could you ever do something that's the antithesis of what you've traditionally done?
I had someone recently try and offer me a corporate job, and I turned it down. Like, it's a job that probably would have been easy for me to do, but it's I have a problem that if someone will say like, "Hey, can you draw a portrait of my child for me?" and it just turns into a monster. Like, I can't help it. Anything I touch always has a dark theme to it. That I've realized after a while that I can't try and change my style, because my style will just come out on its own anyway, which for some reason is always depressing and dark.
Right.
But I really like depressing and dark art from other people and stories from other filmmakers as well. So they generally tend to be my favorite. So I don't know if that's why it just naturally comes out, or maybe it's just kind of what I'm meant to do.
So we probably won't see like a commercial or an ad or a presentation for like a big pharma company or an insurance company from you anytime soon.
I don't think I could. I would get fired, I think, within the first day.
Gotcha. Take these pills, become a monster.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Right.
Then a bat flies by,
Yeah.
stop motion style.
When a lot of people make short films, the inevitable goal for them is to kind of transition from short to feature-length content. Is that something that's kind of on the horizon for you? Is it down the road? Do you have any interest in doing it at all, or are you just kind of comfortable with the length that you're working with right now?
Love to do a feature. I'm playing around with like an actual film feature, just using digital SLR cameras. So that's not stop motion related, but that's film related, just because I like the idea of working on full feature projects. I just haven't, I guess I've been building up from the shorts and then see what happens from there. I probably need more people to work with if I did a full feature.
Yeah, usually that whole collaboration aspect helps out when you're trying to do something crazy big, and you've got to find the right people. Just clone yourself. We're almost there.
I'm working on it.
What else, what else is coming up that people should know about that you can share?
I'm working on a graphic novel project that we want to have done by Christmas. I'm working with a professor named Jean-Philippe Verne. He teaches strategy up at Western. So he's known for teaching courses about capitalism and piracy. So he's taking more of a creative writing approach, a little bit different than his normal writing that he does. So we are doing this. It's it's experimental poetry. I really like it. And we started this project a year ago. We're almost done, but it's a bilingual book. So it's the book gets translated into French, and then the story actually changes because the translations are direct translations, which kind of gives more hints away of the story. It's kind of a weird project, but it was just something that we thought would be fun to work on.
That's great.
So that's going to be coming out.
Where can people follow you and see more of your work online or on Twitter and Instagram? What are all those important URLs and addresses and websites?
My website is sarahlegault.com. So just SARAHLEGAULT.com. Facebook, I post a lot of work in progress and things that I'm doing. Instagram, I'm on there under the Art of Sarah Legault. And yeah, I think those are, I don't really go on Twitter so much these days, but Facebook and my website and Instagram are probably the best ways.
If you guys have enjoyed this chat, check out the other episodes of In the Trenches, our ongoing look at talking with people in the creative industries and the creative fields. So Sarah, thanks again for joining us. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
No problem. And I'm, of course, Rob McCallum, your host. We'll see you guys next time on In the Trenches.